Imagine this. A king wakes in the dead of night, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, after a dream so vivid it feels more like a memory than imagination. In his vision, shadowed figures move silently through his palace, a dagger glinting in the torchlight, and he hears whispers of betrayal that seem to echo from the walls themselves. What he did not know is that this dream would soon become a terrifying reality, a prelude to his own assassination. The story of the king who dreamed his own death begins in a time when kingdoms were built not just on armies and gold, but on loyalty, fear, and the fragile trust between ruler and subjects. This particular king ruled a prosperous land, a realm that stretched from lush valleys to jagged mountains, a kingdom known for its wealth, culture, and the unwavering loyalty of its people. Or so it seemed. Born into a lineage of monarchs who had survived countless rebellions and wars, he was trained from childhood to understand the weight of power, the burden of legacy, and the necessity of foresight. Yet, no training could have prepared him for the whispers of treachery that grew louder as he ascended the throne. In those early years, historians noted that his reign was marked by a combination of careful diplomacy and subtle displays of authority, a balancing act designed to keep both ministers and nobles from questioning his rule. But shadows were already forming within the palace walls. Advisors whose loyalty had once seemed unquestionable began acting in ways that suggested hidden agendas. Courtiers moved with the precision of those who had learned to conceal ambition behind smiles and bows, and even the king's closest confidants occasionally offered advice that seemed guided by motives beyond his understanding. While the public celebrated his decrees, praised his charitable works, and admired the splendor of the court, the king became increasingly aware that power, no matter how absolute, could not guarantee safety. And then there was a dream, unlike anything he had ever experienced. Scholars later wrote that such premonitions, often dismissed as mere imagination, could sometimes arise from the mind's subtle awareness of real threats, a psychological warning that, in rare instances, predicted events with chilling accuracy. In the days following the dream, the king grew more observant, noting the way servants exchanged furtive glances, the cautious distance his generals maintained, and the letters that arrived without explanation yet hinted at unrest in distant provinces. It was in this tense atmosphere of suspicion and expectation that he sought guidance from seers, astrologers, and trusted counselors, desperate for insight into the meaning of his vision. Each interpretation offered fragments, but nothing conclusive, and with every passing day, the weight of foreboding grew heavier. The dream, he realized, was not merely a figment of imagination. It was a warning, one that demanded vigilance, yet also revealed the limits of his power. For even kings, no matter how wise or strong, are never immune to the current of betrayal that swirl quietly beneath the surface of courtly life, currents that can erupt with devastating force when least expected. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy dark history stories like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share your feedback in the comments. The king's dream haunted him more vividly with each passing night, and he could no longer dismiss it as mere imagination or fatigue. He began noticing the subtle signs of betrayal within his court, a servant's hesitant glance, a general's overly cautious tone, letters arriving unsigned yet laced with threats veiled as counsel, and whispers in the hallways that seemed to vanish the moment he approached. The night he first confided in his most trusted advisor, a man who had served his father before him, he realized how fragile trust had become. The advisor's eyes flickered with uncertainty, and the king felt the first pang of fear that even those closest to him might harbor hidden motives. He recalled pacing his private chambers, the flickering candlelight casting shifting shadows across the walls, imagining those shadows as the figures from his dream, creeping silently, waiting for the right moment to strike. Months of subtle observations led him to a chilling conclusion. The palace itself, with its grand halls and hidden corridors, had become a stage for conspiracies, and he was both actor and victim. One evening, he summoned a council in secret, questioning the loyalty of his generals and ministers, but each denied wrongdoing with measured precision, leaving the king more unsettled, for rehearsed denials often concealed deeper truths. He consulted astrologers, seers, and even scholars versed in omens, seeking any clue that could guide him to the gathering storm, and though some offered faint reassurance, others warned that destiny could not be diverted once its course had begun. He became meticulous in his routine, observing every interaction, listening to every word, and scrutinizing even the smallest gestures. Yet the more he watched, the more he realized that deception was woven into the very fabric of his court. The king's nights became sleepless vigils, his mind oscillating between caution and paranoia. Each decision weighed not only for its political consequence, but also for its potential to provoke hidden enemies. On one fateful morning, a messenger arrived with news of unrest in a distant province. A governor, previously loyal, had mobilized forces without explanation, a move that historians later recognized as a test of the king's awareness and a subtle challenge to his authority. The king dispatched envoys to investigate, but the delays, the miscommunication, and the veiled threats heightened his sense of impending danger. At the same time, he noticed unusual behavior among the palace guards. Their loyalty seemed fractured, some too eager, others too distant, as if each feared speaking the truth aloud. Experts studying the case centuries later speculated that this atmosphere of distrust created a feedback loop, amplifying the king's premonition into a near-constant state of dread. The king wrote in his private journal that he could feel the eyes of traitors everywhere, even in empty rooms, and he began rehearsing his responses to hypothetical attacks, imagining every route, every weapon, and every possible betrayal. Then came a day that would mark a turning point. A note was discovered slipped under his chamber door and signed, describing a plot so detailed it mirrored elements from his dream. The same corridors, the same masked figures, the same glint of dagger under torchlight. The king's heart sank as he read the words, realizing that his subconscious had perhaps intercepted truths others had failed to recognize consciously. He began arranging meetings under strict secrecy, altering schedules, and implementing security measures that seemed excessive to outsiders but were necessary to him, as he tried to reconcile his fear with his duty. Meanwhile, advisors continued their subtle manipulations, some unknowingly, others calculatingly, as the king navigated the complex web of loyalty and deceit. He recalled, one night when a trusted envoy hesitated to deliver a message from a neighboring kingdom, an action that, though minor, reinforced the notion that deception had infiltrated every level of governance. Historians now suggest that this early stage of paranoia and preparation might have prolonged his survival, giving him precious hours to anticipate the inevitability that his dream foretold. Yet despite these precautions, the king could not ignore the gnawing sense of inevitability. He understood that destiny, once glimpsed, often arrives regardless of human intervention. He documented each encounter, each suspicion, each minor betrayal, hoping to map the network of conspiracy that surrounded him. The palace, which once symbolized stability and authority, had become a labyrinth of potential death, and every shadow was a threat. He confided to no one that he feared sleep itself, for dreams no longer offered rest. They offered foresight, a terrifying clarity of events that had yet to unfold. One particularly harrowing night, he awoke to find his chamber door slightly ajar, the lock untouched, the torch flickering as though something unseen had moved. His heart raced, and he realized that even the smallest lapse in vigilance could prove fatal. Over weeks, he implemented a system of layered security, secret passages, and false routines designed to mislead any would-be assassins. Yet he was painfully aware that cunning and chance could render all precautions meaningless. The king began noting patterns, the way his ministers walked, the order of letters delivered, the timing of meals, and the subtle variations in conversations that hinted at deeper plots. Scholars later interpreted these meticulous observations as early psychological strategies for survival under extreme threat, a testament to human adaptability in the face of mortal danger. The king also wrestled with moral dilemmas. The question of how far he could go in controlling, deceiving, or punish his own court to ensure survival, balancing justice with the instinct for self-preservation. Each step he took in secrecy, each maneuver in the shadows, was chronicled in journals he kept hidden, as he knew that even a single disclosure could accelerate betrayal. And yet, despite every precaution, the dream persisted, intensified with each hour, a spectral rehearsal of events he could neither fully prevent nor ignore. One morning, intelligence arrived that confirmed part of the dream. A small faction within the royal guard had been bribed to facilitate entry for an unknown party during a state ceremony. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but he maintained composure, redirecting forces, arranging diversions, and personally inspecting security points, while internally calculating the inevitability of confrontation. His advisors marveled at his foresight, but were unaware that each move was dictated not only by strategic necessity, but also by visions that seemed to anticipate reality. The king's narrative, preserved in private accounts and rediscovered by historians centuries later, reveals a precise tension between foresight and fatalism. He could predict, prepare, and defend, yet destiny loomed, unwavering, awaiting its appointed moment. He described the psychological toll, the fatigue, the constant anticipation of ambush, and the way he began to dream even while awake, visualizing corridors, secret doors, and the glint of metal as he walked through his palace halls. He recounted subtle clues that eventually coalesced into the unavoidable conclusion that the assassination, though not immediate, was being orchestrated with deliberate precision, and that even the smallest oversight could prove lethal. Every conversation, every letter, every movement was now measured against the framework of the dream, and he wrote directly to the reader, warning that even in an age of swords and secrecy, human foresight and intuition can sometimes glimpse the machinations of death long before they arrive, that vigilance is essential, but that inevitability is a force beyond the reach of mortal control, shaping events in ways the keenest mind can only partially comprehend, and that history remembers both the cautious and the doomed with equal permanence. The days that followed intensified the king's dread, as every seemingly ordinary event carried hidden significance, and every gesture from his courtiers felt like a coded message he had yet to decipher. He began conducting secret inspections, walking corridors in disguise, observing the behavior of guards and servants, and noting subtle deviations from routine that might indicate collusion. Each observation added pieces to a puzzle that was both terrifying and tantalizing. For the more he watched, the clearer it became that the dream he had experienced was not an illusion, but a window into plotting and deception that surrounded him. He described in his journals how the palace itself seemed to breathe, how corridors that once felt familiar now carried a sense of menace, and how shadows moved in ways that suggested unseen eyes were tracking him at every moment. The king's strategy became a delicate balance. He could not openly confront suspected conspirators without alerting the others, yet inaction could mean death. He wrote of sending trusted messengers under cover of darkness to verify loyalty, of creating false schedules to mislead potential attackers, and of constructing hidden escape routes in case the inevitable confrontation came sooner than expected. In his private chambers, he documented the behavior of each courtier, from ministers to servants, noting inconsistencies, evasions, and subtle gestures of fear or complicity. Scholars centuries later noted that this meticulous attention to detail reflects both a mind under extreme stress and the ancient understanding that perception could be as critical as force in matters of survival. Yet despite these precautions, the king felt that fate was tightening its grip, guiding events toward a climax that no preparation could avert entirely. He recounted one evening when a seemingly innocuous banquet revealed hidden tensions, glances exchanged across the hall, a servant's hesitation, and the slightly ajar doors that allowed conversations to be overheard, all reinforcing the certainty that plots were advancing unseen. He described the psychological toll of such constant vigilance, how sleep became elusive, how dreams merged with reality, and how even the simplest interactions required careful analysis. The king recorded instances where advisors presented contradictory information, some intentionally misleading, others inadvertently revealing the depth of conspiracy. In one chilling entry, he described a moment when a trusted general entered his chambers late at night, ostensibly to report a border skirmish. Yet the king sensed subtle evasions, a nervousness that spoke volumes about hidden agendas. Every detail, from the folding of letters to the arrangement of ceremonial items, became a potential clue, and the king's mind operated like a finely tuned instrument, capable of detecting the faintest irregularities. He noted patterns in the behavior of the palace guards, some acting with exaggerated loyalty, others withdrawing subtly, and he began to realize that understanding the intentions of individuals was as vital as knowing their capabilities. As weeks passed, rumors of unrest in distant provinces reached the court, providing further evidence that factions were testing the stability of his reign. Each rumor was meticulously cross-referenced with observed behaviors, letters, and dream recollections, creating a complex network of intelligence the king used to anticipate potential threats. He wrote of one night when he discovered a secret correspondence between a minister and a provincial governor, letters that outlined contingencies for removing him from power. The king's response was careful and deliberate. He allowed the correspondence to continue long enough to understand the scope of the conspiracy, then acted with precision to neutralize the immediate threat, while keeping the wider network unaware of his awareness. He described the blend of fear and calculation that dominated these months, the constant weighing of options, and the realization that every action carried potential consequences, both for himself and the kingdom. The dream that had foretold his assassination now guided his waking hours, shaping strategies, decisions, and interactions. He documented the subtle interplay of loyalty and ambition, noting how some courtiers sought power through manipulation, while others, unaware of the larger plot, unwittingly became instruments of betrayal. The king's meticulous records included observations about human behavior under pressure, hesitation, overcompensation, and a tendency to reveal truth unintentionally through microexpressions, tone, and timing. He also reflected on the isolation imposed by such vigilance, how friendships and familial bonds became strained, and how paranoia, while necessary, exacted profound psychological cost. One particularly harrowing account described a council meeting in which he subtly tested ministers by presenting false information, observing reactions, and mentally mapping alliances. The results confirmed his fears. Hidden factions were aligned, prepared to strike at the first opportunity, and the conspiracy extended farther than even he had suspected. He began to manipulate events carefully, introducing controlled misinformation, monitoring reactions, and redirecting potential threats to maintain stability while buying time. Experts later noted that his actions illustrate the delicate art of power under existential threat, the blend of intuition, observation, and strategic deception that defines survival in a world where a single misstep could be fatal. He recounted how he used his own dream as a template for anticipating moves by adversaries, imagining scenarios in which each individual played a role, and testing these possibilities against the reality of interactions within the palace. Each night, he recorded the outcomes, comparing behavior to expectation, and adjusting strategies accordingly. The psychological burden was immense. He admitted to feelings of exhaustion, fear, and despair, yet these were tempered by resolve to survive and protect the throne. Historians examining these documents emphasize the human element, a ruler caught between foresight and inevitability, navigating a labyrinth of deceit that mirrored the dream that had begun this ordeal. The king's narratives reveal moments of profound insight, such as recognizing that not all betrayals are overt, that even well-meaning advisors can inadvertently accelerate danger, and that perception is as critical as force in matters of survival. He noted that minor anomalies, a misaligned rug, a delayed messenger, a slightly different tone in conversation, became crucial indicators in his assessments. In addition, he documented how he used his understanding of human psychology to predict potential conspiracies, often anticipating moves before they were executed, giving him a precarious advantage in an environment where any lapse could be fatal. He recorded the tension of living in a state of constant anticipation, the toll of monitoring every detail, and the subtle balance between appearing calm and concealing inner vigilance. He also reflected on the inevitability suggested by the dream, that certain events, once set in motion, could not be avoided entirely, and that his task was not to prevent destiny, but to navigate it with maximum survival. In direct address to readers, he emphasized that even with prescient insight, outcomes remain uncertain, and that the delicate interplay between knowledge, action, and fate defines the line between survival and catastrophe. Through meticulous observation, strategic manipulation, and constant vigilance, the king bought time, delayed actions of his adversaries, and subtly undermined plots, all while acknowledging the limits of human agency in the face of destiny. His accounts underscore that preparation, intelligence, and psychological acumen can extend life and preserve power, but cannot fully alter the course set in motion by forces beyond control. And through this exhaustive chronicle, he not only documented the conspiracy, but also conveyed the extraordinary psychological endurance required to navigate threats predicted in a dream, illustrating how insight, caution, and foresight intersect in the most extreme circumstances, ultimately revealing a ruler both trapped and empowered by the knowledge of what was to come. As the king approached the climax of this terrifying ordeal, every day became a careful choreography of observation, deception, and anticipation, each moment saturated with the knowledge that a single misstep could trigger fulfillment of his ominous dream. He described in his journals how the palace, once a place of ceremony and comfort, had transformed into a living maze of threat, with corridors that concealed not only servants and nobles, but potential assassins, and doors that once invited passage now seemed to harbor shadows poised to strike. The subtle signals of betrayal became more pronounced. A smile that lingered too long, a servant's hesitant step, the unusual arrangement of documents on a table, all combining into a language of conspiracy only the king could read. He wrote of one evening when an unremarkable council meeting revealed a network of coordinated gestures and coded exchanges, confirming that the conspiracy was not isolated but spanned multiple factions, each with its own motive, each aware of the others, yet unaware that the king had begun piecing together their collective intent. In these moments, the dream resurfaced vividly, reminding him of the dagger and the torchlight, the silent movements, and the inevitability that had always loomed just beyond perception. He recounted a night when he personally shadowed a minister suspected of relaying secret instructions to conspirators in the provinces. The subtle tension in the man's posture, the careful avoidance of certain chambers, and the occasional furtive glance became a living map of treachery that he could navigate, albeit with extreme caution. This meticulous surveillance, he noted, exacted a psychological toll unlike any other, blending fear with acute insight, paranoia with strategic advantage, and exhaustion with sharpened perception. The king described how he used a dream as a reference point, imagining every corridor, every figure, every glint of steel in advance, rehearsing multiple scenarios, adjusting placement of guards, and even altering ceremonial routines to disrupt potential plots. Scholars later analyzed these strategies, noting how his use of imagination combined with real-world intelligence demonstrates a profound interplay between foresight and vigilance in historical leadership under extreme threat. The king documented incidents where minor anomalies, the delay of a letter, the misplacement of an official seal, the quiet disappearance of a servant, became critical indicators, allowing him to anticipate movements that others believed were secret. He also recounted moments of moral ambiguity, the necessity of deceiving allies to protect the throne, the careful manipulation of those who pose indirect threats, and the delicate balance of using force and diplomacy to maintain both safety and legitimacy. One particularly tense night involved intercepting a messenger who carried false instructions intended to draw him into a trap. The king described how he feigned ignorance, allowed the messenger to return, and then subtly redirected the conspirators through calculated misinformation, buying precious time to prepare for the eventual confrontation. He reflected on the psychological impact of living constantly on edge, of knowing that even trusted friends could become instruments of betrayal, and of understanding that human ambition often operates independently of loyalty or morality. The dream, which had initially been a source of fear, now became a tool, guiding him through this web of intrigue, revealing patterns of movement and likely courses of action, yet always leaving space for unpredictability, for human choice, and for error. He described a fateful day when he observed a guard behaving inconsistently, timing his rounds differently, and glancing repeatedly toward a side entrance. These subtle deviations mirrored elements from his dream, confirming the convergence of foresight and reality. The king documented the deployment of loyal forces along key routes, the arrangement of palace chambers to maximize visibility, and the deliberate presence of witnesses at critical locations, all intended to disrupt conspiratorial coordination. He recounted the tension of the moments before a state ceremony, the anticipation of hidden adversaries, and the careful orchestration of appearances to avoid revealing the extent of his awareness. Historians analyzing these accounts emphasize the extraordinary mental acuity required, as the king balanced fear, anticipation, and strategy in a context where each choice carried life or death consequences. He reflected on how the conspirators themselves underestimated the depth of his preparation, unaware that the very dream they mocked or dismissed had become the blueprint for his countermeasures. In journal entries that survived centuries, he detailed the psychological strategies employed to maintain control, deliberate feints, staged observations, and carefully timed engagements that created the impression of normalcy while he managed threats in real time. The king's writings reveal moments of profound insight. The realization that betrayal often travels through small, almost invisible channels, that vigilance must be constant, and that the human mind, when aware of danger, can transform fear into both anticipation and action. He described a moment when a final, decisive plot became apparent, a coordinated attempt involving multiple factions intending to assassinate him during a public ceremony, using disguises, concealed weapons, and timed distractions. The king acted with precision, altering seating arrangements, repositioning guards, and subtly redirecting movements, all while maintaining a facade of calm, aware that detection of his awareness could provoke immediate escalation. He recounted how intuition and observation converged with documented evidence to form a clear understanding of the threat, allowing him to neutralize several participants before they could act, while leaving others unaware that their plans had been uncovered. The psychological tension was immense, knowing that even a fraction of error could be fatal, that every gesture could trigger catastrophe, and that each action must balance immediate survival with long-term political stability. He also reflected on human behavior under pressure. Hesitation, miscommunication, and overconfidence among conspirators contributed to the king's ability to anticipate and counteract moves that might otherwise have succeeded. Scholars examining these chronicles note the rare intersection of foresight, lived experience, and psychological insight, illustrating how awareness of danger, even when informed by a dream, can influence outcomes in complex human networks. The king described how the culmination of preparation, vigilance, and careful manipulation of information allowed him to survive the critical event, to confront conspirators indirectly, and to assert control without immediate bloodshed. In closing entries, he reflected on the duality of destiny and agency, that even when forewarned, humans remain subject to error, chance, and circumstance, and that the interplay between insight and inevitability defines both the triumphs and tragedies of leadership. He wrote directly to future readers, emphasizing that knowledge can be a tool of survival, but that awareness alone is insufficient without action, discernment, and the courage to navigate uncertainty. The king's story, preserved through his meticulous journals and reconstructed by historians, offers an enduring lesson that human foresight, intuition, and psychological acuity can influence events even when fate appears unyielding, and that the mind, when attuned to subtle signals, can become both shield and compass in the most perilous of circumstances. The dream that foretold his assassination did not guarantee safety, yet it provided a map, guiding a ruler through a labyrinth of deception, manipulation, and human ambition, and reminding us that even the most terrifying premonitions can be navigated with vigilance, strategy, and unwavering attention to the faintest signs of threat. Through his careful observations, calculated actions, and remarkable endurance, the king survived a conspiracy that might have seemed inevitable, demonstrating that foresight, when paired with decisive action and relentless scrutiny, can alter the trajectory of even the most ominous of destinies, and that understanding human behavior under threat is as critical to survival as knowledge of the external dangers that loom beyond the palace walls. Every note he recorded, every subtle shift he observed, and every small intervention he orchestrated was a testament to the extraordinary demands placed upon a leader aware of imminent danger, a leader who understood that destiny may reveal itself in dreams, yet must be confronted in reality with clarity, courage, and strategy, blending foresight with human understanding in a way that resonates across centuries, offering lessons not just in survival, but in the profound complexity of navigating power, betrayal, and the fine line between fear and action when one's life and one's kingdom hangs in the balance. The story of the king who dreamed his own assassination leaves a lingering sense of awe and reflection, reminding us that even the most powerful individuals are not immune to the currents of fate and human ambition. His life, meticulously chronicled through journals and recollections, reveals the extraordinary tension between foresight and inevitability. He demonstrated that insight, whether derived from intuition, observation, or even dreams, can become a guiding force in navigating threats. Yet even the clearest vision cannot fully shield one from the uncertainties of human behavior. In every shadowed corridor, every cautious glance, and every intercepted message, the king recognized a fragile line between survival and catastrophe, learning that vigilance must be constant, perception must be sharp, and trust must be measured with care. These lessons are not confined to centuries-old palaces. They resonate today, urging us to consider how awareness, preparation, and understanding of human motives can influence outcomes in our own lives, even when circumstances seem beyond control. Yet amid the tension and foreboding, there is also a profound human story of resilience. The king's ability to transform fear into strategic action, to observe without immediate reaction, and to anticipate moves that others assumed would remain hidden, offers a timeless example of courage under pressure. His story teaches that survival and agency are intertwined with careful observation, mental acuity, and the discipline to act when necessary. It is a reminder that even when events appear predetermined, thoughtful intervention and a keen understanding of human behavior can shape outcomes in meaningful ways. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell icon, like the video, and tell us in the comments what type of stories you'd like to see. Where are you watching from right now? And how does the king's ability to foresee danger yet navigate it resonate with you? His journey shows that the human mind, when attuned to subtle signals, can become both a shield and a compass in moments of extreme peril, teaching us that vigilance, courage, and insight remain as essential today as they were in the palace of a king whose dream foretold his own death.